People all over YouTube seem to be getting more and more into the idea of self-optimization. Now, some of them tell us how to eat our way to happiness. Others show us how cold water plunging can be a game changer. And others pitch us on supplements that can change our lives. There are even the real visionaries who can manipulate time to grind harder.
What I've done now is I have changed and manipulated time. I now get 21 days a week.
Yeah, I'm personally good with my style of having half of a productive day every other day and then one hyper-productive day every 2 weeks. Now, this is all in the name of achieving some mythical peak performance, which at first glance seems good because why wouldn't we want to get the most from our muscles and neurons? But when we look closer, we can't help but ask, are people trying to optimize themselves to live better right now? Or at the heart of this phenomenon, are people simply trying to fight the inevitability of death? And if so, is that a fight we can win? Well, let's find out in this Wisecrack edition on self-optimization. Can we cure death? Okay, so to be fair, self-improvement is not a new phenomenon. Humans have been trying to self-improve basically since we had a concept of a self that could be improved. Now, the most notable improvement has been our lifespan, which has doubled over the past 200 years in the United States alone. But like plenty of good things, having a longer lifespan leads to a whole other host of problems. Now, today, when people die, they always seem to die of something. There's no such thing as just dying of old age. But way back in the day, most people didn't live long enough to experience age-related problems with their bodies. They were too busy dying of extrinsic factors, like getting an infection, falling off of a cliff, or getting used as sushi by a predator. Now, these folks didn't have to worry about the diseases that take us out today. According to Andrew Steele, for every extra year you live, your risk of getting cancer, heart disease, stroke, dementia, and many more terrible conditions increases inexorably. From the perspective of disease risk, at least, it's better to be an overweight, heavy-drinking, chain-smoking 30-year-old than a clean-living 80-year-old. Steele also points out that humans have a risk of death that doubles every 8 years, which is hard to grapple with in a death-avoidant culture like ours. But hey, maybe as a way to avoid death anxiety, let us know in the comments your ideal death. And if you're starting to experience death anxiety right now, just take a deep breath and remember that heaven might be real. I mean, it's pretty unlikely and we haven't really had any evidence for it. Now, there's a long history of humans trying to do stuff to help them live longer. Things like inventing vaccines, learning about which foods benefit us, or just sanitizing the water. But for our purposes, we'll skip ahead to the most contemporary version of people trying to trick out their bodies so they won't die. It's called biohacking. And it's telling that this practice employs the language of hacking, implying the very contemporary Silicon Valley brained belief that when you understand the coding language of anything, you're able to take control, and in many cases, profit. Now, according to a gal I went to Sunday school with named Merriam-Webster, biohacking is biological experimentation, as by gene editing or the use of drugs or implants, done to improve qualities or capabilities of living organisms, especially by individuals and groups working outside a traditional medical or scientific research environment. In other words, it's a version of doing science to yourself, outside the context of a hospital or laboratory. Researcher Dr. Morgan Meyer examined the history of the concept of biohacking, also known as DIY biology, through online discussions, tracing it back to 2008 when its main discussion forum was launched. As Meyer describes it, biohacking was created to make biology accessible to non-scientists. He notes that biohacking preceded internet forums, citing biologist Rob Carlson, who in 2005 said, "Advent of garage biology is at hand. Skills and technology are proliferating, and the synthesis and manipulation of genomes are no longer confined to ivory towers." Meyer traces the roots of biohacking to, naturally, regular computer hacking, as well as things like the open source movement and synthetic biology. For many, biohacking looks like aggressive lifestyle changes and serious supplement usage. According to Dave Asprey, owner of supplement company Bulletproof, famous for their coffee, which tastes like shit, biohacking is the art and science of changing the environment around you and inside you so that you have full control over your own biology. According to Vox reporter Seagal Samuel, he has stem cells injected into his joints, takes dozens of supplements daily, bathes in infrared light, and much more. He thinks all this will help him live to be 180. To which I say, what are you going to be doing at 180? I think that's ridiculous. Let me know in the comments how long you think is long enough to live. One of the most famous biohacking enthusiasts is former Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey, someone who I honestly never thought I'd miss, and now I think about him every day of my life. Now, Jack's biohacking regime includes lots of walking, 1 meal a day during the week, and no meals at all on weekends. And I'm going to say that again. He doesn't eat food on weekends. Now, before you accuse me of sounding smug, it's worth noting that many people who get into biohacking start for very honest and understandable reasons, like feeling healthier and preventing serious illness, which then escalate once someone feels like they can control their own body. As Asprey said, I don't want to be just healthy, that's average. I want to perform. That's daring to be above average. Instead of how do I achieve health, it's how do I kick more ass. According to Samuel, what differentiates biohacking from traditional medicine is arguably not that it's a different genre of activity, but that the activities are undertaken with a particular mindset. The underlying philosophy is that we don't need to accept our body's shortcomings. We can engineer our way past them using a range of high and low-tech solutions. We don't necessarily need to wait for a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trial, traditional medicine's gold standard. We can start to transform our lives right now. And because of the entrepreneurial spirit at the heart of the American project, many folks have quickly figured out how to monetize the hell out of these trends. So you got Healthzilla, which is a company that promises to use data and analytics to help you optimize your health and life. Evolve Human Optimization Labs is a sort of biohacking gym which offers services like cold water immersion, red light therapy, Norwegian saunas, infrared saunas, yoga, electro, muscle stimulation, percussive massage, and so on. Onnit is a brand offering supplements and other products to help you achieve what they call, and they really say this, total human optimization. And those of you living in the city of brotherly love can visit the Anti-Aging and Longevity Center of Philadelphia, which has glowing reviews from financial advisors and real estate agents. Now, to be clear, we are not sponsored by any of these brands, and we would highly recommend that you investigate thoroughly before spending any of your money on stuff like that. And if you're really trying to just throw your money into an endless void, we have a Patreon. You can give us money, and we'll promise you nothing. We're not going to make your life better or easier. If anything, we'll make it harder because you get more content on the Patreon, content that will push you to think about life in new and critical ways, and you'll be on the Discord with new friends to challenge your ideas and expose you to new ways of thinking. You know, it'll be hard. It's going to be a hard journey for you, but I think it's going to make you better. Okay, so you can just pause the video now. There's a link in the description. Just go give us your money now. Now, there are at least two ways to think about this logic. On the one hand, biohacking can be seen as a way to democratize science, enabling individuals outside of formal scientific and medical spaces to make their own biological discoveries, which is noteworthy as historically only the ultra-wealthy have had early access to these types of technologies. On the other hand, in not accepting our body's shortcomings, it seems we run the risk of rejecting the reality of our own materiality and finitude. Because like it or not, we are sacks of meat and bones that come out of the womb with an expiration date printed on our bottoms. Now, this all seems to reveal that at the core of attempts to hack human biology is a larger existential question about the purpose of life and the meaning of death. And a recent show exploring one Norse god's quest for bodily optimization seems to get at the way in which much of the trend towards optimization is really just a losing battle with death itself. Now, we're talking about the delightfully odd series Limitless with Chris Hemsworth, created with Darren Aronofsky. If you're familiar with Aronofsky's films, this is a choice. This is a choice. Now, in the show, the God of Thunder consults a variety of experts of human longevity to figure out how to best prolong and optimize his own life. Along the way, he gets the upsetting news that he is genetically predisposed to developing Alzheimer's, which is genuinely a bummer and has to be really wild news to get on camera.
You have an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease.
How much higher?
Probably somewhere between 8 and 10 times higher than that of someone in the general population.
But rather than ending with some heroic tale of overcoming genetic predispositions towards disease and death with the newest biohacking and optimization techniques, the show concludes with a very surreal journey towards Hemsworth's death. With the help of extensive prosthetics and a series of physical and environmental limitations, the show creates a sort of end-of-life simulation, which allows Hemsworth to experience what the slow crawl towards the grave is going to feel like. It's kind of like if the Jackass movie Bad Grandpa was actually a surreal meditation on the finitude of human existence. But in doing so, Limitless makes clear that all of the previously explored techniques to prolong life are ultimately rendered useless when compared to the absolute power of death. In the process, Hemsworth is forced to have a much more existential encounter with his own mortality. And in doing so, it feels like he's able to get something that all of the optimization experts on TikTok and YouTube seem to ignore, a sort of reckoning with the meaning of existence, which leads us to think that the solution to the problems supposedly being solved by biohacking and optimization is actually philosophical. Now, before you roll your eyes or accuse me of just being another grifter for the 19th century philosophy industrial complex, let me remind you that philosophers have been thinking about death since long before the first biohacker ever blended a stick of butter into their morning coffee. And in many ways, death is the thing that philosophers, both ancient and contemporary, have spent the most time thinking about. For Uncle Socrates, it was dumb to worry about death, precisely because it's a thing that no living person has ever experienced, and to fear something that you have no knowledge of is a waste of time. Instead, the wise move is to accept your ignorance about death and focus on what you can know something about, your own life. 17th century philosopher Baruch Spinoza agreed, writing that a free man thinks of death least of all things, and his wisdom is a meditation not of death but of life. More recent thinkers on the topic have argued that making sense of death is fundamental to understanding human subjectivity. Like Martin Heidegger, who I must mention was both an important philosopher and complicit with the Nazi Party, so if hell is real, he's the chair of its philosophy department. Heidegger oriented much of his philosophical project around the idea that human existence and subjectivity is primarily a being towards death. This means that all of our existence is oriented towards making sense of the big D, which is anxiety-inducing because, as Heidegger describes it, we're literally thrown into existence, something we're only made aware of when we realize we're going to die. It's kind of like being thrown into the final exam of a class you never signed up for in the first place. And much of his understanding of this was built on his reading of noted non-Nazi Soren Kierkegaard, who described part of the fundamental human experience as a sickness unto death. For Kierkegaard, it wasn't so much death itself that makes us unhappy, but rather a despair about our finitude. Put differently, we think it's our relation to death making us unhappy, but it's really a misrelation to ourself that makes us miserable. Now, this existential despair is what he considers the real sickness unto death. Basically, existential angst will ruin your life way more than death ever will. Kierkegaard sees the only way out of this despair as accepting our finitude and embracing the existential uncertainty of our own lives, much like Hemsworth eventually does. In light of this, it seems that many of these optimization and biohacking strategies aren't really responses to death itself or even the literal fear of biological death, but rather are more existential sickness unto death. And unfortunately, you can't cure existential despair with cold water plunges, macrobiotic diets, supplements, or fasting. And focusing all of their efforts on these things, it seems that the optimization industry is forgetting what's more important than fighting death, namely, living life. And more specifically, living a meaningful life. Following this, it's worth asking ourselves, which approach is more embracing of life? Sitting at home over the weekend drinking water while doing a 48-hour fast, or being out and enjoying afternoon drinks and snacks with friends? Should analytics and data be the primary determining factors of what we do with our bodies? Or does simple human pleasure get a seat at the table as well? Now, one side of this dichotomy seems to be privileging the staving off of death, while the other seems to be more oriented towards the immediate embrace of existence. And to be clear, there is nothing wrong with thinking about how to live healthier lifestyles. In fact, this is an objectively good thing to do. But it's important to simply ask, why are we doing it? Is it to fight against the anxiety of our finitude, or to feel healthy as we embrace the life that we have in front of us, even if we can't ultimately control how or when it ends? But let us know what you think in the comments. Thanks as always to our patrons for all your support. If you want to join this group of illustrious individuals, there's a link in the description. We'd love for you to check it out. But most importantly, thanks to everyone who watches our videos, subscribes, likes, leave comments. It means a lot to us, and I mean that very, very genuinely. But for now, we'll catch you next time, and I'll see you later.